All right, there you have it. 2 years nearly after Ahmaud Arbery was chased down, shot, and killed in northern Georgia. The three men charged with his death have been convicted. Travis McMichael, who fired the shots that killed Ahmaud Arbery, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for malice murder. His father, Gregory McMichael, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for felony murder. And Roddy Bryan, William Roddy Bryan, sentenced to life with the possibility of parole for his conviction on felony murder. We heard a lot from the judge there, Judge Timothy Walmsley. Let's bring in CNN's Diane Gallagher, who's outside the courthouse. Also with me, criminal defense attorney Page Pate. Page, first, your reaction to the sentences.
Well, Victor, I'm not surprised by the ultimate sentence. I've appeared in front of Judge Walmsley before, and I think he handled this entire trial, including the sentencing proceeding, very well. I think he did the right thing in considering what he did. Obviously, it was very important to this court, and I think it was important to the jury. The absolute lack of any remorse from any of these defendants, with the possible exception of William Bryan. Not just in court, when we heard the testimony of Travis McMichael, but right after the incident happened, they turned their backs on Ahmaud Arbery like he was an animal in the street. And I think ultimately that's what led the judge to impose these sentences, life without the possibility of parole for the two McMichaels.
And Paige, the use of silence here in this sentencing, where Judge Walmsley said that he was just going to be silent for a minute, which was just a fifth, he said, of the time that Ahmaud Arbery was being chased in that Satilla Shores neighborhood. Your thoughts on that use?
Well, Victor, trial lawyers love to do that. I think at a time when they want the jury, and in this case, everybody who's watching the proceeding, to understand that even though the defense lawyers were saying, look, this was just a short moment in time, just a sliver of their lives, the judge wanted to remind everyone that this was the ending of Ahmaud Arbery's life. And before those fatal shots hit him, he was running through the neighborhood in fear for his life, not just for 1 minute, but for 5 minutes. And just think about how he felt. So I think it was very appropriate. It's unusual for a judge to do that. But I think today Ahmaud Arbery got his moment of silence, and the judge gave it to him.
Diane, the judge also said that he was going to leave a lot of the opining about the case to those outside the courtroom. He had to separate the sentencing from, as he said, the notoriety and the influences outside the courtroom. And you'll remember early on, the defense attorney for William Roddy Bryan complaining about what he called black pastors coming into the courtroom. The judge tried to separate what's outside that courthouse door and inside in his sentencing today.
Yeah, and I can tell you that as those sentences were being handed down, the people who are gathered out here outside the courthouse, Victor, it's a much smaller crowd, but it was still quite a few people who've been here all day. They wanted to see Ahmaud Arbery's family in and show their support. They erupted in cheers. Just a few moments ago, I heard people chanting life sentences, life sentences. And so there's been this feeling of emotion outside of the courtroom, inside the courtroom, that moment of silence that the judge held, showing the impact of just how long Ahmaud Arbery was running. Ahmaud Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, put her head down. She bowed her head during that moment of silence when the verdicts were, or excuse me, the sentences were read. His family was crying. His father, his mother, they were crying. And you could see the McMichaels. When the sentence for Travis McMichael was read, Greg McMichael sort of leaned back into his chair there. Other than that, there wasn't a lot of outbursts. There weren't outbursts. There wasn't a lot of audible emotion. Out here, I can tell you that it was almost silent as everybody was paying attention to televisions until, and phones and audio, until those sentences were specifically handed down. And that's when those cheers erupted out here, Victor.
Yeah, the judge quoted Wanda Cooper Jones, Ahmaud Arbery's mother, and when she said, when they could not scare or intimidate him, they killed him. Page, to you, the way in which the judge spoke about Ahmaud Arbery, juxtaposed to what we heard from defense attorneys, the description of his toenails at the end of the trial, in which he called him a young man with dreams, talking about his graduating from high school and the terror that he must have faced. Page.
Yes, Victor, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were going to play part of that. It's devastating to hear that. I have never understood, and I've been practicing criminal defense in this state for 25 years. I never understood why the defense lawyers didn't simply present a case where they said, look, we thought we were justified to pursue him because we thought he may have been committing some crimes, but we were wrong. We were wrong, and we apologize for that. Not once did we ever hear that type of defense. Instead, they blamed Ahmaud Arbery for being there. They blamed Ahmaud Arbery for not having socks on, for having dirty toenails. I don't know how in the world they expected that to resonate with any jury, even an almost all-white jury. So from the beginning of the case to the end, I think the defense really missed the boat on trying to present the best case that they could for their clients here.
And Diane, the judge understood that there would be no statement of remorse on this day of sentencing because they have this federal trial that's expected to start next month. To you, Diane, I wonder, we heard about a potential deal or an offer for a deal, questioning the parents about a deal. What was their response?
So according to the attorney for Ahmaud Arbery's mother this morning, he said that they had been reached out to about a deal that would have included a plea that allowed the defendants to spend 30 years for these federal hate crimes. And Wanda Cooper Jones said she didn't want that because they were confident that the sentence today was going to be the sentence they received, but also that they wanted that to go to trial because there wasn't a lot of talk about racial motivation in this particular trial. It was about the incident itself and maybe not so much how black and white played into it. And that is something that we will hear about in that federal trial. Now, again, part of the reasoning was that they were confident that this sentence, especially, she said specifically for the McMichaels, was going to be what, in fact, the judge did hand down today. But you mentioned remorse and how much the judge brought that up in his statement there, talking about you don't have to actually get on the stand and apologize, understanding the position that would put somebody who is facing additional charges in a separate trial would be in. But the judge assessed that he didn't see that, any sort of anything from the McMichaels, or even on scene or in the video, and that idea of remorse is the reason why he attributed some of the ability to give that life sentence with the possibility of parole to William Rodney Bryan.
Paige, I see you nodding and shaking your head a lot. Just weigh in here.
That's another thing I don't understand, Victor. I mean, you don't want to put your client up at a sentencing proceeding and admit to guilt in some other case that could hurt him at trial, but that would not have happened here. There's no question who killed Ahmaud Arbery. That's never been an issue. The only issue is to why. So having a defendant, one of these defendants, stand up and say, yes, I did this, I was wrong, and I regret to the end of my life what happened. That's not going to hurt him in a federal civil rights trial, in a federal hate crimes trial. If anything, that's going to help him, because then perhaps the jury could see, if they hear about it or know about it, or the government wants to introduce it, that he actually did care somewhat. And maybe the actions that he took that day were not motivated entirely by race, because if they were, then they're getting convicted in federal court. So they could very well have made those statements if they chose to do it. So I think what this says is they didn't want to do it, and that's very different.
Ariva Martin.